If you like this video, please give it a like and hit subscribe. Hit the notification bell not to miss more content coming soon. And welcome back to another episode of FPL Squad Picks. It's Game Week 31. We're going to take a look in this video at the review from Game Week 30, take a look at some transfer options for Game Week 31, a little bit of a planning for some chips that people may have remaining, and then we're going to look at my team selection and captaincy and talk about a few other players that would be good picks if they're not in your squad. So without further ado, let's jump in. Here we have a quick run through of last week's fixture results. We kicked off with Chelsea versus West Brom, which gave us a shock result with West Brom beating Chelsea 5-2. We saw Thiago Silva get sent off, and we saw Pereira having an outstanding game, and Robinson's coming off the bench to get another goal against Chelsea, just a team he seems to keep scoring against. Then we had Leeds versus Sheffield United, who did manage to get a goal against Leeds, but they held out and managed to get the win. With a great performance from Harrison, and Rafinha also getting an assist. I know that Rafinha is in a lot of people's teams. We then have the Leicester versus Man City fixture. City's form continuing again with another clean sheet. We then have the Arsenal versus Liverpool game, which ended in 3-0 to Liverpool. Great performance seeing Jota back. Seems like having these players back from injury is now starting to improve the Liverpool team a bit better, and they could finish the end of the season strong with a favourable run of fixtures. We then have the Southampton versus Burnley game. Saw a lot of goals between the two teams. Burnley also getting 2 on the board, but Southampton managing to come away with the win. Newcastle versus Tottenham. Again, Tottenham going ahead, and Newcastle managing to claw back for a draw. Same in the reverse fixture earlier in the season. Tottenham just unable to hold out and get that 3 points. Aston Villa versus Fulham. 3-1 for Villa. They went down first, letting Fulham go ahead, but they came back strong. Ollie Watkins getting in amongst the goals, and a great performance overall from the Villa team. Man United very similar with Brighton. I know in the reverse fixture Brighton hit the post so many times and Man United were very lucky not to get a few goals more conceded against them, but they did go 1-0 behind Man United to the Brighton team and then managed again to claw it back to get the 3 points. Everton versus Crystal Palace saw something similar to the Newcastle and Tottenham game, where Everton went ahead 1-0, just couldn't convert anything else. And towards the end, Batshuayi coming on from the bench and making sure that they got the 1 point for a draw. Wolves versus West Ham saw again a flurry of goals in the West Ham game. They went up and got the lead and managing to concede only 1 goal by half time. So it was 3-1. They did claw back for another goal, Wolves, and just couldn't finish it. It did have it all written out a bit like the Arsenal game last week, where Arsenal managed to come back for a 3-3 draw, but this time the Hammers were able to hold out. So here's my team as it's set up for Game Week 30. Finished the week on 58 points. Not very good defensive performance. Martinez still managing to get me some save points even though he conceded. And nothing else really across the back three. Moving into the midfield, I did manage to pick up some points with Fernandes getting 5 and Rafinha getting 6. So I got some assists across there. Nothing else for the Spurs assets, with Son only coming off as a bench appearance and Lucas Moura being taken off in the second half without any influence in the first half. Did have a solid game, but still nothing to get any points. The top 3 then, Bamford only managing 2, Watkins getting a goal which brought him up to 7, and Kane thankfully managing to get a good points haul, and with the captaincy bringing me up to 26 points. No show from the City boys on the bench, and White was always going to be third option, and again getting nothing against the Man United team with 2 goals against them. So it did mean a green arrow overall, which I was quite pleased of. Not a massive green arrow, but still managing to climb a little bit. And the mindset was really, do I take a punt this week? And a lot of talk was to potentially bring in someone like Alonso, who did manage to get an assist and did look very good hitting the post within that West Brom game, but still not managing to get a massive points haul. Could have brought in someone like Havertz, but obviously he didn't even play, and that backed out to be a good decision. My switch was Bale into Son, so pretty much a like for like. I just thought that out of the two, he was more likely to get a better string of minutes. Turns out he didn't play the first half and couldn't really get up to speed in the second half to have a big influence. And there were a few other options I could have played around with to take a punt. And my next option then potentially was to hit the wild card for this game week. But I didn't want to leave myself in a position where I'd just set up, take any old punt. They'd be not a good person to carry forward for the next game weeks, and I have to take the wildcard hit. Because looking at my team for the next game week, it's not terrible and it could be okay. Maybe I could just take a one change and just pull some players through, like a lot. I'm looking at the Leeds players in specific here against the Man City team that are in really good form. And I could also look to take a points hit here or there. But obviously I still have the wild card. So if I was taking multiple point hits, it's not really worth it when I've got that chip sitting there and it's getting closer towards the end of the season. So my mindset was to just give me a bit of an option that if it didn't work out to maybe want to play the wild card this week, I could still carry this team forward, still have 3 Spurs assets in ready for that game week 32 double for Spurs. If you like this video, please give it a like and hit subscribe. Hit the notification bell not to miss more content coming soon. So for this week, if I was to look at a transfer, and especially for other FPL managers that don't have any chips to play in the next coming weeks, then if I was to look at some transfers, I'd probably be looking towards the Liverpool players, namely Jota, and if you have the money and the funds available, then potentially Salah. And I know obviously they had a bit of a poor fixture against Real Madrid in the Champions League, but you have got to remember that is Real Madrid. Even if they have been in a bit of lack of form recently, they are sort of specialists in the Champions League, and Liverpool have been coming off a bit of a bad run of form, but had a good Premier League fixture last against Arsenal. Looking at their fixture run, they've got Aston Villa, Leeds, and then they go into Newcastle for the next 3. And also in that game week 33, there are a lot of teams that are blanking, and a lot of the sort of premium players, so you're looking at the Spurs and Man City assets, they won't be in that week. So if you've got some good informed players with good fixtures coming in, then it might be something to look at. And I think that's where I'd probably be leaning at if I was to make it just a straight transfer this week or even a points hit. So looking at the sort of midfield and looking at the fixtures that my players currently have, you have Fernandes who are playing Tottenham, and then you have Son playing United. So in that same fixture, I've also got Lucas Moura playing United. So it's a lot of players wrapped up in the same game that could end up a bit of a 0-0, bit of a 1-1 sort of situation again. You have seen that in a lot of the United fixtures that they've been against the sort of standard top 6 teams, they have come out with a bit of a board draw. So it's looking a bit difficult. I have got Gundogan against the Leeds team, but again, there's so many question marks on Pep's rotation. I'd like to think he'd be one of the ones that is playing in this game because they still haven't secured the top spot, and I think they still need a few more wins to win the Premier League. But I do know obviously they've got a lot of fixture congestion coming up with a few semi-finals and finals and knockout rounds still within the Champions League, EFL and the FA Cup. So it's going to be a bit difficult to navigate that, but Gundogan did miss the last Premier League game and played the Champions League game, so I'd like to think that he could get another run out in this fixture here and then potentially miss next week's game against Aston Villa. So I'm looking at also then I've got Rafinha. He's playing in that same fixture. He has been in really good form, and there's nothing saying that he couldn't get a return in this game. And it's someone to sort of keep an eye out for, maybe if you wanted to have as a bit of an enabler, just to bench him if you've got a decent enough squad to navigate this game week. But certainly for my team, I'd be looking at potentially having to play him. So not the best and not the strongest sort of fixtures to target, but some good players to target there. So I think that realistically, this week I'm probably going to be looking at the wildcard situation and seeing if I can pull together a team that is a lot more different than this one. If it's only 1 or 2, maybe 3 players, there is a bit of an argument to have that I could potentially take just a points hit to get those players moved around and keep that wild card for either the game week 32 double for Spurs, for the game week 33 blank, or those end fixtures of the season where there's been a lot of talk of fans returning to stadiums and them looking to maybe move a few fixtures earlier so that they can get those fans in as well. So that's something to bear in mind, but I'd prefer, if possible, to maybe use it now, and then looking forward, I've got a few options there to build a good team for the next few game weeks. I can still roll a few transfers, hopefully, if I've got a good team for this week and next week, which means I've got 2 free then to play with until the end of the season. But back to this game week, if you are looking at potentially just taking a transfer or 2 and you haven't got any chips to play, a few good fixtures within this game week, you could look at potential Wolves players. They've got Fulham this week, I know that obviously they performed quite badly against the Hammers, but they usually have got quite a decent defence. Something to look at. I know they've got a few sort of injuries and COVID cases going on, so it might be worth leaving that choice till quite a late decision to the deadline, just to make sure if you've got any early team news there, as it is the first game of the game week. And if they do say that those defenders are fit and ready to play, you could look at bringing in potentially someone like Cody. If you wanted someone a bit more attacking, Sice, who's I think 0.1 million more. And they've got pretty good run of fixtures for defensive assets. You could also look at Pedro Neto, and he is someone that does get some good returns now and again, but someone that hasn't really been really prolific. So it's just up to you, obviously, if you wanted to look at that. But a decent fixture, even though Fulham have been a bit stronger in defence as of late. The next sort of targetable fixture would be the Man City-Leeds game. You'd like to think that Man City would be able to get some good scores against Leeds, who tend to let a few goals in, but also do like to get their own sort of attacks and get a few points in as well. So you could go on that route, but there is obviously the pep roulette that you've got to deal with. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of congestion of fixtures at the moment, so it's going to be quite difficult to get a player that you think is definitely nailed on. Even the likes of Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan, I think they're the sort of shining talismans of the team at the moment, and I think they might need some time to rest with the congestion of fixtures. Obviously Sterling has been benched in the last 2 fixtures, so he could be potentially having a run out in this game, but that's not guaranteed. They've got such a big midfield to pick from, with Bernardo Silva on the fringes, Mahrez, Foden, and I think it's just too much choice there. Even Torres has come on now and again for a little bit of a run out, so you're sort of picking at your peril there. Even with a defence, you could look at someone like Cancelo, who hasn't played in the last Premier League game, and you could look at potentially looking at Diaz, because he has been a lot more nailed on, but there's going to come points where they're probably going to get rested, or even come on for sort of a few minutes if they're struggling. But if you're bringing them in this week, it's a bit of a risk. The next game to look at would be the Liverpool-Villa game. I know the reverse fixture was a bit of a shock result earlier this season, but I don't see that happening again. I still see that Villa has potential to score goals, but I think if you're looking at sort of good attacking assets, Liverpool have got a good choice there in Salah and Jota, even Mane as well, who hasn't been really performing that great recently, but still could turn it round, and he has been sort of involved with the attacking threats, just not converting those into points. The other one to mention is Trent. I know that he has been there or thereabouts, trying to cross good balls in. Does have a shot now and again from outside the box, but obviously it's just that sort of clean sheet capacity that if he doesn't get that, you're sort of 6 points out already, and you are banking on him trying to get an attacking return, and it's a lot of money wrapped up in a defender. Then you could look at the Chelsea Crystal Palace fixture, and again they've just come off a bit of a bad result, but then they also played in the Champions League, kept a clean sheet against Porto, and also managed to score 2 goals. So they could be a potential to look at either for defensive assets. You've got that battle between Chilwell and Alonso, who's going to play. Alonso played in the last Premier League game, Chilwell played in the last Champions League game. So it's going to be, do they go back to the Alonso and they're going to be sort of flipping between those two? Or will Chilwell get a little run now because it was such a bad result? Maybe I'm just second guessing this really, that Tuchel might think Alonso was great but so attacking that it left them open at the back. So it might be a case of that Chilwell's got a bit more of a defensive asset to get him into the team to make sure they get the result. But it is Crystal Palace. They have got potential to score a goal or two, but again, they're not the massive attacking threat that you normally see in sort of the big 6 teams, and you would like to think that Chelsea could handle them, maybe with Zaha slipping through the net, or Batshuayi if he does have another run out from the bench. Looking further down the fixture list, because it looks like there's a few tight fixtures in between there, then on the Sunday, there could be a potential to bring in Arsenal players. They are playing against a Sheffield United team that are low on confidence at the moment. Even though they did manage to score 1 against Leeds, they still lost the game. So Arsenal, you could look at potentially bringing in Aubameyang if you have the spare money to bring him in as a bit of a differential pick. Saka, and there's also a bit of a discussion to be made about Odegaard. Haven't seen too much about him, to be honest, at the moment. But again, if you're looking for a different pick, someone else to bring in, then you could be looking at the Arsenal players against a sort of favourable fixture this week, and next week then they have Fulham. So could be a potential for this and next week. A bit further down the list then we're looking at Southampton, West Brom. I'd like to think that Southampton can do a good job there. They managed to score 3 against a normally tight Burnley team, and Danny Ings is still playing in form at the moment, scoring good goals, managing to stay fit. There's also a cheaper option in Che Adams. He's been doing pretty good for international duty and has been sort of in and around the fringes around the Southampton results as well. Another player to keep an eye on is Walcott. I know we haven't seen too much on him at the moment. He went a bit sort of hot and cold, good when he first joined into the team, and he's gone a bit quieter now, but definitely someone to look at. And I think that it's a good idea if you want to look in for this week to bring them in, and potentially then they'll have a tougher fixture next game, which is against Spurs, but they do blank in that game week 33, so something to bear in mind. If you'd like to keep up to date with the latest video posts, locked in team selections, and chat during the game week, then you can follow me on Twitter at FPL Squad Picks. So my ideal transfer this week, if I was just going to use my one free transfer, would probably be Rafinha for Jota. Unfortunately, my funds don't allow me to do that in this team. So I think, as I mentioned a bit earlier in the video about Rafinha being a good enabler, he's got such a good price point that it might be worth just holding on to him, keeping him on the bench. I know that he hasn't got a good run of fixtures in the next few, but towards the end of the season they have. So even if he ends up in my team towards the end, it's not the end of the world holding some Leeds players. So if I was to bring Jota in this week, I think the only one that I could bring in to make way would be Lucas Moura. It's not ideal at the moment because obviously next week Spurs have a double game week, but it is debatable at the moment is, do I really want to have Moura as my third option for a Spurs asset in the double game week? I could potentially look at someone like Reguilon and hope that he gets a bit more of an attacking threat as well. And just because of the way that they're flipping around this midfield, Mourinho is still not getting the results, and it might be a case of that Lamela and Bale also get more of a look in, which means that Moura could then be the one that's sacrificed. Even Lo Celso coming back from injury has sort of played that into a bit of consideration that he might not get the same amount of minutes that he has been, but he has been performing really well. So with the mention of Jota and Gundogan, I think this week with the fixtures that they have, they could be a good shout for a bit of a differential captaincy pick. Especially with, at the moment, I've got Fernandes, Son and Kane, who would usually be the players looking at for captaincy. They're playing one another, and I think that they're both in a position where Man United don't want to give up their second place position, so they don't want to go conceding too many, and Spurs are probably going to be fighting a bit more to get that top place. Then it might be a bit of a stalemate. I think that you might see one of those games again where we've had against a United Arsenal and United Chelsea where it came out as 0-0 or 1-0. So I don't think it's sort of wise to back those. The Leeds players are playing against a City team that I just don't think they're going to do too much against. They've been really solid at the back, and even if they do again get 1 or 2 points, I think the City could be in for a bit more of a haul than they can. It's just depending on who would play within that City team. Haven't really got much confidence in the defence, and also Watkins, I can't really see him doing too much against Liverpool, even though they have been a bit more sort of leaking goals at the back. If they're still without Grealish, or if he has just come back in, this is his first game, he might not be the sort of in-form player that we all expect him to be straight away, as he's been out for quite a while. So I'm not sure if they'll have that same sort of potency to get loads of goals against Liverpool. It might just be the odd one. So with the potential between Man City and Liverpool having really good fixtures, I think Jota and Gundogan could be a good potential pick for captaincy this week. So this week there's been a lot of people discussing whether or not to use their wildcard ship. It's a bit of a strange one because it's not a double game week. We do know that it's going to be a double game week in game week 32, but not for this one. But just because of the fixture swings, a lot of teams and a lot of players that potentially had some bad run of games previously have now going to have some decent fixtures for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I think a lot of managers are starting to build their wildcard teams with not only game week 32, but game week 33 in mind, because there will be a blank for Man City and Spurs. So you're going to look to bring in a lot of Spurs players for game week 31, ready for game week 32. And then after that, then game week 33, you may have 2 to 3 Spurs players that aren't playing. So it's either a case of, do I have enough depth in my team to bench those Spurs and Man City assets to then play a good starting 11 with maybe 1 or 2 transfers, because you will obviously pick up those in the next 2 weeks? Or is it a case of, can I look to get rid of those players and bring someone else in? But bearing in mind, if you are going to look ahead to those fixtures, for game week 34, Spurs play Sheffield United. So it's quite a good fixture to hold those players if you have that squad depth. So this is what obviously a lot of players are looking at now with, if you do take your wildcard chip, getting that squad depth that will carry you through a double game week, a blank game week, and out the other side then to finish the season with the next 3 or 4 game weeks quite strongly. So I think personally, looking at the amount of changes I could potentially make within my team, I will be hitting the wildcard chip this week. I will look to get another video out and get the drafts made up. Hear your opinions, see what you think, see if you've got any other choices. And I think a lot of my decision making at the moment is potentially bringing in Trent, which is wrapping up a lot of money, which means that my front strikers are sort of going for the more cheaper picks. But it's quite unusual really that I think the midfield I've got is pretty set. I think because we've got quite a lot of the mid-priced midfielders doing really well at the moment, and a lot of the fixtures sort of playing nicely that you don't have to go for a lot of the premium. And I think that at the moment I've got Bruno in my team. I've been really happy with having him as a consistent player, but I think United's fixtures are really hit and miss. They have a good one, a bad one in constant rotation till the end of the season. Whereas you look at maybe Salah and Jota, who have got 3 good fixtures on the bounce. You also look at the Spurs assets, who are blanking in 33, but they get a double in gaming 32. So just weighing up on those premium options, I think it might be a case of that someone like Bruno gets left out. Potentially bringing in someone like Trent, or if I don't bring in Trent and I can downgrade him, I'm saving about 2 million that I could potentially put into one of the strikers up front. So I'll get those videos out shortly, have a little look at the drafts. I hope you've enjoyed this and it's given you a bit of thinking around your team and your transfers this week. Feel free to leave a comment below about who you think will be vital this week and going forward. If you feel I've missed anyone, put their name below to hear mine and other managers' thoughts. If you like this video, please give it a like and hit subscribe. Hit the notification bell not to miss more content coming soon. Thanks for watching.